William Regal is the ultimate wrestler's wrestler. Sure, he never won a world championship and he didn't main event WrestleMania, but to his peers, he represents the absolute best of the craft. He's been a major influence on the careers of Daniel Bryan, Pete Dunne, and countless others, even helping to train many of them in his British catch style. He's routinely been considered as one of the best technical wrestlers alive, and as one of Triple H's most trusted lieutenants, he has used his eye for talent to bring many of the world's greatest wrestlers to WWE over the years. His career has been a long and storied one, from his younger days wrestling in the UK, all the way to his time spent in the United States, where he still resides to this day. So join us today as we take a deep dive into his fascinating entire career journey in Lord of the Ring, The William Regal Story. Darren Kenneth Matthews was born on May 10, 1968 in Codsall, Staffordshire in England. The future WWE legend spent his childhood falling in love with old-school wrestlers like Terry Rudge and John Cortez. At the first possible opportunity then, he decided to follow their lead and hit the ring himself, starting when he was just 15 years old at the Horseshoe Show Bar on Blackpool's Pleasure Beach, a popular working-class vacation spot in England. In time, he developed a reputation for being a shooter, a feature of old carnival wrestling where the person in question would have real amateur knowledge, something that they could use to beat away challengers from the audience, maintaining the illusion that what was happening in the ring was real. This legit fighter rep helped Matthews get a job with All Star Wrestling, where he performed all around the UK, regularly teaming with fellow Brit wrestling legend Robbie Brookside. The team even got national exposure in 1987 and 1988 when they started appearing on ITV's British Wrestling, reaching the homes of millions in the process. ITV's wrestling coverage was the lifeblood of the UK scene in the 80s, with the likes of World of Sport being even more popular in some places than WWE was. It helped create stars like Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks, and Adrian Street, but for as popular as these performers were, none of them had the talent of Darren Matthews. When ITV's wrestling coverage ended then, a lot of these stars faded into obscurity, while the young shooter continued on around the world, honing his craft in places like Germany and South Africa. Eventually, he fell under the radar of WWE and was recruited to take part in the company's upcoming UK show, UK Wrestling Rampage, on April 24, 1991. While he would not be signed with the company at that time, they would remember him in the future. In the meantime, though, he would end up working for another US-based company, WCW. He started off doing a few dates during their own UK tour in December 1991, at one point even taking on the future Kevin Nash, then performing as Oz. A year later, and the company agreed to sign him to a full-time deal, bringing him to America for the first time. In WCW, Matthews started off as a babyface, but by early 1993, he had already morphed into the villainous Lord Steven Regal, claiming to be a direct descendant of William the Conqueror. This turned out to be the missing element from his act, and after it was established, his career blossomed. He won the WCW Television Championship from Ricky Steamboat at the September 18, 1993 Fall Brawl. Regal's television title reign was filled with successful defenses over a who's who of the industry at the time, including the likes of Arn Anderson, fellow Brit Davey Boy Smith, and even Japanese wrestling icon Antonio Inoki. He memorably had a best-of-5 Queensberry Rules series with Ric Flair in the spring of 1994, a series which Regal lost, but one where he was able to prove just how good he was in the ring, not just keeping up with the Nature Boy in the ring, but by pushing him to his limits. After losing the belt to Johnny B. Bad at the September 18, 1994 Fall Brawl, a year to the day after he had first won it, he began scouting fellow aristocrat Jean-Paul Levesque in an attempt to convince him to team up. Levesque will of course be better known to modern fans as Triple H, WWE legend and heir apparent to the company. Here though, he was still a rookie himself, and the two would begin partnering in January of 1995, starting a friendship and working relationship which continues to this day. Unfortunately, Levesque wasn't long for WCW by that point, and he left only a couple of months later, necessitating Regal finding a substitute partner in Bobby Eaton. Together they became known as the Blue Bloods and had some success as a duo. While they were doing this, the Englishman got the chance to wrestle as a single star too during a 1995 tour of New Japan Pro Wrestling. This was where he challenged for the prestigious IWGP Heavyweight Championship against Shinya Hashimoto, a match where, despite a hard-fought effort, he would lose and would be forced to head back stateside to continue on with WCW. By January of 1996, Regal had begun a new feud, this time with the Belfast bruiser Fit Finlay. The two played up the historical rivalry between England and Ireland during the program, one that climaxed in a hard-hitting catch-style mat classic at that year's uncensored pay-per-view. If at times it looked more like a real fight than a wrestling match, that's because it basically was. The two men, both proud of their tough shooter styles, absolutely destroyed each other, resulting in a broken nose, fractured cheek, and 12 stitches above the eye for the Blue Blood, as well as contributing towards Finlay needing a shoulder replacement years later. It took a while for both of them to recover after this, but when Regal was back to full strength, he was able to challenge for the television championship once again on August 31, 1996, beating Lex Luger to win the belt after Luger had been attacked by the Outsiders. Yes, we were now firmly in the NWO era of WCW. Regal, however, never really got involved in all of that. For the most part, he remained on his own island, where he would defend his TV title against all comers. He beat Hacksaw Jim Duggan, he beat Dean Malenko, he even beat his now former partner Bobby Eaton, the two having split up earlier that year. Eventually, this reign came to an end too, though, and for a few months after this, the Staffordshire native sort of milled around the mid-card aimlessly, the NWO invasion now having taken over pretty much all of the interesting storylines on WCW TV. On February 9, 1998, he was booked to take on the rising star Bill Goldberg. The match was stiff, with Regal seemingly refusing to go easy on Goldberg, drawing him into a technical match and exposing him as someone with very limited in-ring capability in the process. Backstage, Eric Bischoff was furious that his new babyface star had been made to look bad on live television, so he fired Regal on the spot, claiming that he had asked for Goldberg to steamroll his opponents, something that would fit with the way he was being booked at the time. Regal, for his part, has always denied this, saying that before he went through the curtain that night, he was told to have a competitive match with the newcomer and had only been trying to push him into having a solid in-ring bout so fans could see a different side of him. The actual truth is still unclear to this day, but it's possible it was all just a case of crossed wires, as WCW management weren't exactly known for being the best communicators at that time. The end result was the same though. Steven Regal was now without a job. Luckily for him, WWE were fans of his work, and brought him in beginning on the June 29th episode of Raw, where he defeated Droz via submission, keeping his English Blue Blood gimmick, but now going by the slightly altered name of William Regal. Initially, Vince McMahon wasn't impressed with what he saw. Feeling that his new signing was out of shape, he sent him to Dory Funk's training school to get in better ring condition. While there, the Englishman broke his ankle and developed an addiction to pain medication during the recovery process, something which would dog him for years afterwards. When he returned to TV in late 1998, it was under a new gimmick of the Real Man's Man. This reinvention was introduced to audiences via pre-taped vignettes which showed him doing traditional manly tasks such as chopping wood and shaving with a straight razor. It's been suggested that this gimmick, created by Vince Russo of course, was set to end with the reveal that Regal had been gay the whole time, something we're sure all parties involved are glad never happened. Given how tasteless many of the Attitude Era's storylines were, this one would no doubt still be getting brought up in a negative light to this day. Thankfully though, it never got to that point. Unfortunately, the reason for this was that Regal's drug addiction was spiraling out of control, so much so that the company took notice of it and checked him into rehab in January 1999. After showing minimal improvement by April, he was released from his contract altogether and forced to go back to WCW. Luckily, Eric Bischoff was out of the picture by now, and the new bosses had no qualms about bringing their former TV champion back in, albeit briefly. He hung around for a few unmemorable months there until he was released once again, his drug issues continuing to get worse. For some people, alienating the two big players in your chosen profession would be career suicide, but not for William Regal. Vince McMahon obviously saw something in him because he gave him another shot in the autumn of 2000, though he would first make him go down to Memphis Championship Wrestling for a few months, if for no other reason than just to prove that he could get his issues under control and perform in the ring. For the time being at least, he did, and he could. He reappeared on the September 18, 2000 episode of Raw as a heel, and quickly became the European champion after beating Al Snow. He was also featured in one of the most genuinely funny segments on WWE TV when he stood in the middle of the ring and began reciting Hamlet in its entirety to a jeering audience, only for Steve Austin to come out, give him a stunner, and then immediately leave without saying a word or causing a break in his music. After holding on to the European title for a few months, Regal would find himself in maybe his most memorable role in WWE, beginning on the March 8, 2001 episode of SmackDown, when he would be declared the new commissioner of the company. It was during this period that he got a chance to show a side of himself that many wrestling fans hadn't seen before. Sure, they knew he was great in the ring, but few realized how good of a performer he was in backstage skits. The Englishman's odd couple routine with his assistant Tajiri was fantastic, and his pantomime facial expressions were often laugh-out-loud funny. Seriously, go back and watch the look on his face after he drinks that cup of tea that, unbeknownst to him, Chris Jericho has just urinated in, and tell me it's not hilarious. Sadly for those who love the Regal and Tajiri pairing, however, the former commissioner has since spoken about their relationship, saying that they didn't get on at all behind the scenes. He's even gone as far to say that he hated the Japanese buzzsaw with an absolute passion. This is unfortunate to hear, but then some of the best double acts throughout history, such as Abbott and Costello or Simon and Garfunkel, have famously been at each other's throats at various times. Maybe it's part of what makes the magic on screen. Personal issues aside, the duo would continue on until Regal joined the Alliance in mid-2001 during the Best Left Forgotten Invasion storyline. Once this was over and WWE were firmly victorious, he was forced to become the inaugural member of the Vince McMahon Kiss My Ass Club in order to get his job back. By January 2002, however, he was able to recover from this embarrassment when he beat Edge to become the Intercontinental Champion. He would win this match in typical heelish fashion by using a pair of brass knuckles to knock out his opponent behind the referee's back. From then on, this would become a recurring part of his character, often getting victories with the aid of the foreign object. At WrestleMania 18, even this didn't work for him though, as he lost the Intercontinental title to Rob Van Dam. He quickly bounced back by taking the European title from Diamond Dallas Page on the following episode of SmackDown, however, taking it with him to Raw when he was drafted there on March 25th of that year. Now exclusive to Raw, Regal formed the Un-Americans, a stable of villainous foreigners made up of himself as well as Canadians Lance Storm, Christian, and Test. The group were mostly used as cannon fodder for their American counterparts, and by September 2002, they would split up, with only Regal and Storm remaining aligned as a tag team. Thankfully, they would have more success, even winning the WWE World Tag Team titles from Booker T and Goldust on the January 6, 2003 episode of Raw. Unfortunately, this title reign was cut short when in February of that year, the former commissioner started complaining of swelling breaking out all over his body. As well as this, he was suffering from an increased heart rate and had trouble sleeping. Initially, he was diagnosed as having contracted a heart parasite while on tour with WWE in India the year before. However, it was later discovered that he'd actually had a long-term heart defect, which was only now becoming apparent. The result was the same either way. He was pulled from TV and had to undergo a full year's worth of specialist treatment, which terrifyingly involved temporarily stopping his heart and having to go through huge amounts of anti-blood clot treatment. It wouldn't be until April of 2004 that he would return to the company, at which time he took on a slightly different role, being the appointed guardian of Eugene, a kayfabe mentally challenged wrestler who had gotten over with fans due to his childlike persona. As a result of this union, Regal turned babyface for the first time in WWE. This led to him and Eugene getting involved in a feud with Evolution. The two would later even win Tag Team Gold together when they beat La Resistance on the November 15, 2004 episode of Raw. When Eugene was injured in January 2005, Regal continued to defend the titles, now using substitute tag partners instead. After a few failed companions, he eventually settled on his old assistant, Tajiri. The now reunited duo were able to keep a hold of the belts until April of that year, soon after which Regal was drafted to SmackDown, where he would once again turn heel. He didn't do a huge amount for this first year on SmackDown. The most notable thing was a feud with the Jack Sparrow-inspired Paul Burchill, where, after losing a match to the Wrestling Pirate, he was forced to dress like a buxom wench for a number of weeks. By 2006, he had joined King Booker's court, a stable formed after Booker T had won the King of the Ring, and whose ranks included Sir Fit Finlay, Hornswoggle, Queen Charmel, and Regal himself, also now relabeled as a Sir and playing the role of the town crier. The whole thing was gold from top to bottom, and as you've probably guessed by now, Regal's comedy chops went a long way towards making it as successful as it was. The only issue we have with that is that it didn't last long enough, as after just a few months he left the team and went about re-establishing himself as one of the world's greatest wrestlers. Following this, he reunited with his old Blue Bloods teammate Dave Taylor, though now on WWE TV, the duo were portrayed as far more sadistic and became a scourge of the tag team division on SmackDown as a result. This union continued until June 17, 2007, at which time the Englishman was once again drafted, now moving back over to Raw. Here, he was soon announced as the new general manager of the brand and began one of his most memorable storylines on WWE TV. Regal was brilliant as a dictatorial madman, abusing his power at every turn and making life a living hell for every babyface on Raw. Much of his ire was focused on Triple H, with Regal even at one point memorably going into the production truck and forcing them to cut the live feed of Raw early so fans wouldn't get to see the Game beat Randy Orton. He also became King of the Ring in 2008 too, giving him more ammunition to spit back at fans after becoming the first man to make CM Punk quit. So good was he during this period, there were even rumors circulating at the time that Vince McMahon was considering giving the GM a run with the WWE title. Unfortunately, this never got a chance to happen because his substance abuse issues resurfaced, and he was suspended for 60 days on May 20, 2008 after failing a drug test. While Regal would return by late July, he would now be dropped down the card, evidently having lost the trust of management. He has since spoken about this event as being one of his biggest regrets, stating that he believed the company would likely never give him that level of responsibility again. Sad as this was, though, the only thing he could do was carry on, and his next feud was against Jamie Noble, with the two men competing over the services of Layla. Regal won this feud and found a new manager in Layla as a result. With her by his side, he won the Intercontinental Championship again, beating Santino Marella in his home country on the November 3, 2008 edition, filmed in Manchester, England. After this, he had a brief feud over the belt with CM Punk, which he would eventually lose. To make matters worse, he also lost his manager when Layla was drafted over to SmackDown. Later in 2009, Regal himself would be drafted to ECW, where he soon became #1 contender to the brand's World Championship, though he was unsuccessful in winning this, getting beat by the at the time champion Christian in only 8 seconds at the August 23, 2009 SummerSlam pay-per-view. By now, William Regal was in the twilight of his in-ring career and was doing what he could to get younger talent over. After ECW was cancelled, he showed up on the early game show version of NXT, becoming a mentor to Skip Sheffield, later to be rebranded as Ryback. As well as this, he moved back over to Raw, though he would more frequently appear on the brand's B show Superstars, working with lower card talent like Darren Young. He did get a chance to face his old protege Daniel Bryan on the November 10th episode of Superstars recorded in England, where, in a practical joke, his entrance music was briefly interrupted by his old Real Man's Man theme, something which you can visibly see both Regal and Bryan having a laugh about on screen. Following this, he took up the role of color commentator in Florida Championship Wrestling, WWE's pre-NXT developmental brand, and feuded with Dean Ambrose. After that, he would make sporadic main roster appearances throughout 2012 and 2013. His final in-ring feud took place on the, by now, rebooted version of NXT against Cesaro. This culminated on the December 25th episode of the brand's show, where Regal did the honors, retiring from active wrestling after the loss. It had been a hell of a career, and anyone else could have stopped right there, content in the knowledge that they were a future Hall of Famer. Regal wasn't done quite yet, however. He would begin his post-in-ring life by being revealed as the new general manager of NXT in July 2014, a role he remains in to this day. William Regal as general manager has managed to succeed where so many other GMs over the years have failed because he doesn't need to appear every week and rarely gets involved in any storylines. Instead, he serves the same purpose that old WWF president Jack Tunney once did, showing up whenever an authority figure is required to book a match or settle a beef. Off-screen, he's also served an important role as a talent scout for WWE, and as of February 2018, the Director of Talent Development and Head of Global Recruiting for the company. He can often be found at major indie shows like PWG's Battle of Los Angeles, looking for the best new prospects out there. As well as this, he has taken on a trainer role at the WWE Performance Center, imparting his years of invaluable knowledge onto the next generation. While previously the likes of Daniel Bryan and Cesaro considered him important in their development, now younger wrestlers like Johnny Gargano and Adam Cole can say the same. His legacy isn't done yet though. It lives on in his son Bailey, who is currently a young lion at the New Japan Dojo. One thing's for sure, if he's even half as talented as his father, he'll be one to watch in the future. Ultimately, William Regal will no doubt go down as one of the greatest in-ring talents of his generation, and one of the best wrestlers to never hold a world title, alongside the likes of Jake Roberts, Roddy Piper, and Owen Hart. From the carnival shows of Blackpool all the way to WrestleMania, he has proven himself at every stage to be the ultimate wrestler's wrestler and a true Lord of the Ring. So, if you haven't already made sure to check out all of his best matches, it should only take you a few months. Well guys, what did you think of the video? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, as well as follow Wrestle with Andy on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.